Hey guys, welcome to video 105. This is part 9 of the complete amplifier design and build series of videos. Today we're going to take a look at the final schematics for the amplifier and the power supply, and I may make some changes to them here and there as I go through the construction and testing, but for right now these are essentially the final forms. I'm also going to show you my chassis layout and the cabinet I'm using, make some suggestions for construction, and also provide you with a bill of materials spreadsheet, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. But for right now, let's go on over to the next page and take a look at a bigger version of the schematic. As you can see, I labeled all of the voltages and currents that we calculated for the circuit here in blue and yellow boxes. All of the voltages are measured with respect to ground, and remember, they're not going to be exact, but these are the nominal values you should expect to see. And I should also mention that there's a possibility that I could change a few component values here and there slightly during the construction and testing process for the amplifier, but if I do make any changes, I'll be sure to note them on a final schematic. And at this point, I'd like you guys to take a look at this and make sure I didn't screw anything up, and I'll move the pencil out of the way so you can get a good screen capture if you want one. And one more thing I want to mention before we move on to the next slide is modifications that you might want to make should you decide to build this thing. Of course, you could change the tone stack, and we talked about that previously, but some other things you might want to think about are perhaps adding negative feedback to the amplifier, which could change its characteristics drastically, or maybe changing the biasing arrangement here on the screen grids. Again, these are things you might want to think about, and I will talk about them more before we're all finished. But for right now, let's go on over and take a look at the power supply schematic. Now, it's been a minute since we talked about the power supply, so if you want a little bit of review about what was going on here, go back to part 1 of this series, that's video 97, and you can brush up on the details. But one thing you may notice here is that I removed the surge limiting resistor from right before the pi filter. It's not necessary here because the high voltage secondary has a winding resistance of 30 ohms, so in the worst case the maximum surge current we're going to get here is 10.6 amps, and whether you're using 1N4007s which have a surge rating of 30 amps or 1N5408s which have a surge rating of 180 amps, they're more than sufficient to handle this surge current. And as you can see, I'm using the 1N5408s here, but the 1N4007s will work just as well. Now, if we come on over to the primary side, I've got a 3-prong plug that goes to the AC line. I always use that because it's safer than using a 2-conductor plug. I've got a 1 amp fuse shown here. I'm actually using a 1 amp circuit breaker because I had some handy, but the actual maximum current under normal conditions here is going to be at about 0.5 amp, so a 1 amp fuse will work well in this position. We've got a single pole, single throw on-off switch, and I used a power indicator that can go right across the 120 volt AC line. You could also use an indicator that goes here across the filament winding of the transformer. Either way will work just fine. And staying down here on the low voltage secondary side for a minute, we've got a current draw of about 2.9 amps RMS for the heaters of all of our tubes. The transformer is rated for 3.5 amps maximum, so we're well within its current handling capability. And if we come up here to the high voltage side, we've got a current draw of about 110 milliamps, and that's not going to change much either because we're using a Class A push-pull output stage. It should draw a relatively constant current at least up until clipping. Then we will get some increased current draw, but under normal circumstances this current is relatively constant at 110 milliamps. And this is only a little bit more than 50% of the rated current capability of the high voltage secondary, which is 200 milliamps, so we're not overstressing the power transformer at all in this application. What I want to do next is go on over to the next page, and we're going to take a look at the distribution of the voltage gain through the various stages of the amplifier. The voltage gain values I have listed here are all just gain magnitudes, and they're based on the experimental measurements we took during the design of the amplifier. Stage 1 was designed to have high voltage gains so we could relatively easily overdrive it. We used half a 12AX7 there and got a gain of about 48. Stage 2 was designed to have relatively low output impedance to drive the tone stack efficiently. We used half a 12AU7 for that one, and it's got a voltage gain of 11. Now, the tone stack I'm using has a gain of 0.1, and I guess I could call it an attenuation, but if you use a different tone stack, you're going to have a different value here for this gain. Now, over in stage 3, we wanted to pick the gain back up to make up for the loss of the tone stack, so we used the second half of the 12AX7, and we got a gain of about 66 there. The phase splitter at best is going to have a gain a little bit less than 1. In our case, it came out to be about 0.86. And the output stage has a gain of around 2. If you use a different screen grid bypassing technique, you could get higher gain here, but 2 is reasonable for this stage. The overall voltage gain is just the product of all of the individual voltage gains, and that works out to be about 6,000. Now, I'm sure nobody remembers all the specifications of our maximum output voltage swing and stuff, so if I paste that up here, we had a maximum unclipped output of a little more than 13 volts peak, with an output power of 11.3 watts RMS unclipped. Now, based on the output of 13.4 volts maximum with a gain of 6,000, that means with all the volume controls maxed out, it only takes about 2 millivolts peak to drive this thing into clipping. So we've got plenty of voltage gain here to spare. And now coming down to the reverb section, we've got two modes of operation. Normal operation, we're getting the same signal level into the reverb driver as we're putting into stage 2, and we can adjust both of them simultaneously with our gain adjustment here. Now, if we set it for super reverb operation, we're bypassing this gain adjustment, and we're getting the full signal from stage 1. Our reverb driver has a gain of about 0.27. It's low because we're stepping it down with a transformer to efficiently drive the reverb tank. And I'm adjusting the reverb level over here prior to the reverb amp, which has a gain of 100. That output is mixed back with the dry signal up here at the output of the tone stack. Now, in super operation, it's possible that we could turn the dry signal all the way down to 0 and just feed a reverb signal into the output stages of the amplifier. So using this mode, we can get a purely reverb driven signal here at the output, which is kind of cool, and that's why I put this option in here. You don't have to use it. You could just use a normal reverb just like any other amplifier, but I think the super option is kind of cool. And I put the level adjustment over here on the output of the reverb tank so that when we have it set to 0, we're not going to hear any noise from the reverb tank getting bumped or banged or anything like that. Now, with respect to the output voltage from the reverb tank, if we max out the reverb and master pots, we've got an overall gain here of about 1100. And that means if we can get a 10 millivolt peak signal out of the reverb tank, we'd get an output over here of about 11 volts peak, which is pretty close to clipping. So we can get a significant output power level from the amp just with the reverb circuit acting alone. And I want to tell you guys right now that I have not built this amplifier yet. I've built a bunch that are like it, but I haven't built this exact amplifier yet. And I'm assuming that all of my assumptions and engineering approximations and stuff are going to work out pretty well, and we're going to have a pretty nice amplifier here. But we'll find out when I build it, and you guys will get to see that pretty much in real time. Now, let's go on over to the next page and take a look at some of the construction and hardware aspects of this thing. Now, you guys may remember from way back in the very first video in this series that I decided I'm going to go with a tweed style cabinet. Now I'm doing that because I already have one built and I kind of like them anyway.
I feel the need for tweed.
Thank you, Michael Scott. I agree. And if you decide to go with the tweed cabinet route, you could buy one that's pre-built, but they're pretty expensive, anywhere from around $300 up to maybe $400. The one I built is shown over here. It cost less than $100 to build, and I used a greenback 12-inch 8-ohm speaker in it. They're about $159. And we'll talk about speaker options later, but this is what I went with. Now, overall, as far as cabinets go, to build your own, the tweed style is probably the hardest, and mine's a little bit on the small size here, which constrained the size of the chassis I could use as well. But anyway, the things I needed to finish this were obviously some plywood, glue, Tolex covering, and grill cloth. I used corner protectors, but they're not necessary. And another handy thing that I got was these countersunk washers and machine screws, and nuts too. They were used to mount the grill plate on the front and the amplifier chassis inside the cabinet. Other things you'll need just regular wood screws, and you don't really need a fancy wood shop or anything. I did this with just a saber saw and a circular saw. It's not beautiful, but it's functional and works just fine. So if you want to do this, it is possible with a minimum amount of tools. And because this isn't exactly a high resolution image here, let's go on over to the next page and get a better look at the cabinet that I built. As I said, it's not beautiful, but it's functional. All right, now let's go on over and take a look at the chassis that I'm using. This is an aluminum chassis. I prefer to use aluminum over steel because it's so much easier to work with. And this is about the biggest size that I could use with the speaker cabinet that I have, 13.5 by 5 by 2 inches. I would recommend something a little bit bigger to make it easier to work with, but that's up to you. Now you can see I started laying things out on here. My transformers and filter cap are on the top, and this side we're looking at the tube socket side, and I did change it a little bit, but you can see it's pretty well laid out in the final form. And if we go on over to the next page, I drilled it out and used some grommets for the holes where transformer wires are going to go through to keep them from chafing. And for the most part, I used these step drills to make these large holes, and they work pretty well with this aluminum chassis. Now at this point, I mounted the transformers, tube sockets, jacks, and pots, and so on. So let's go on over to the next page and take a look at what we've got here. Starting at the bottom left, over here is where the line cord comes in. Now this is a thing called a cable gland. Normally you'd use a strain relief of some sort over here, but cable glands are pretty handy because you can use a round hole to mount them, and they hold the cord just as securely as a strain relief does. And I'll talk a little bit more about these later. Now beside it here is my 1 amp circuit breaker, and then my tube sockets. I've got 3 of them here. This is my speaker output jack. These are my reverb connector jacks, the RCA connectors that go to the reverb tank. And over here are 2 more tube sockets. I think these are for the 12AX7 and the 6AN8. Now, going to the center here, you can see I'm using terminal strips for my wiring connections. You could use a turret board, but I like these terminal strips. They work just as well. And I like to put as many in there as I can, and if I have extra lugs left over, that's fine. I just like to put as many terminal strips in the amp as I can to make construction easy. Alright, now over here is my power transformer. You can't see it, but it's up there. This is the filter cap. It's a 2-section capacitor. We'll talk more about that in a second. These are where the wires are coming in from. Over here is the power transformer. Here is the output transformer, And over here are the wires from the reverb transformer. And of course we've got all of our volume and tone and reverb pots, the input jack, our power indicator, reverb mode switch, and power switch. And let's go over and take another look at it so that we can see how the pots are mounted. Okay, this is our input jack. This is the reverb switch, power indicator, power switch, and as you can see, this is my cable gland used for a strain relief on the power cord side. And finally, if we come over here, there's a top view where we can see all the potentiometers, the input jack, power switch. This is our power transformer, filter cap, output transformer, and reverb transformer. And finally, here's a view from the back side where the tubes go, and you get a little better look at the circuit breaker and the cable gland / strain relief. Notice that two of my tube sockets can have shields mounted over them, so I use these ones for the 12AX7 and the 6AN8 because they have the highest voltage gain and they're most likely to pick up noise. Over here, this is the 12AU7, and these are my two EL84 power output tubes. Now, because I've been talking so much about this cable gland over here, it's something that I've never used on an amplifier before, but if you look them up online, you're going to get these kind of results. They're pretty inexpensive, 89 cents a piece. That's what they look like, and they're pretty handy for this application. Now, we're just about done. There's one more thing I want to show you, and that's the bill of materials spreadsheet that I've got put together for you, and this is what it's going to look like. I put a link to it in the description. It's got all the resistors listed on one page, capacitors, the tubes, transformers, diodes, miscellaneous parts, sources. These are some links where you can find all of this stuff, and just another page with a builder bill of materials. But anyway, the link to this is in the description and you can check it out. It may be subject to change if we've changed the values of a few parts, but I'll keep it up to date. And that's just about it for today, so I'll see you guys next time around where we're going to start actually wiring this amplifier up.